Hey watch friends, today we're going to take a look at a watch from a company based out of Thailand. This is the Wise Hitman. In case you missed it, we recently featured an unboxing of this one. If you haven't checked it out already, I do encourage you to check that out. It does come with really nice packaging, overall nice experience for that one. Comes with a double box, comes with multiple tools for it, microfiber cloth, all that kind of good stuff as well. So it does set the presentation well for this piece. Additionally, if you haven't already, I do encourage you to hit that subscribe button. We have great content coming all the time. So with all of that out of the way, I do first want to touch on an administrative matter. As I mentioned, if you did see the unboxing, this one, and you might have seen the paid promotion banner on the screen, this one was sent into the channel for review, and I do not have to send it back after review, so I want to be very transparent about that. While Wise was not a company that I had heard of prior to this review, the initial reviews that I was seeing in deciding whether to review this piece or not looked favorable, and I've got to say, the spec sheet was impressive. Overall price point, gonna address this right off the bat. This one's coming in at $325, but there are often discount codes that are available, so you can potentially get these for at or maybe even under $300, and that's in US dollars, which, as we'll talk about, I think is an exceptional value. I think this piece really has a lot to offer, and really, in my opinion, Wise is pushing the bar as to what you can expect at that kind of a price point. So with that, let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics of this actual watch. First, for the warranty, this one does come with a standard 12-month warranty, but because of the parts that are in this, I don't think you're really likely going to need it. It has the reliable NH35 movement, those kind of things, but we'll touch upon all of that. The case on this one is coming in spec'd at 41 on my calipers, 40.8 millimeters, and that's roughly at the 3 to 9 position on the case here. The bezel does step down just slightly. This one is coming in at 40.5 millimeters, so just a slight little step down to the bezel. The lugs come in at a strap change friendly 20 millimeters, and then the lug to lug on this is coming in at a versatile 48.6 millimeters. The overall thickness, and this one's pretty impressive for an NH35, this is only coming in at 12.4, so just under 12.5 millimeters on an NH35. That's pretty darn good. Additionally, while we have this flipped over on the side, you can see this does have a flat crystal, and that is a sapphire crystal, and it does have an inner AR coating. We've already talked about the fact that this one comes with an NH35 movement, and we'll take a look in more detail at the Caseback here as we go through. Water resistance, with being a dive style watch, this one comes in right around where you'd expect at 200 meters or 20 atmospheres of water resistance. Additionally, size to my 6.5-inch wrist, this one on the bracelet is coming in at 147.8 grams. So I'd call it right about a middle weight. Not the lightest in the world, but certainly not a chunky watch or heavy watch either. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics of this watch, what it's like to live with, the pros, the cons, all those kind of good things. First, for the colors. This is one of the big things. For the dial colors, you can get this in black, gray, blue, of course the green that we're looking at. But one of the big things is I can't pop them all up on the screen, but I do encourage you to check out their website. They come in different bezel combinations. You can get some that are matte, some that are gloss. You can get different handsets, different date windows, all different kinds of options for these. So you just have loads of choices for this one in addition to the overall style. As far as looking at this specific dial, for this green one that we're looking at today, this one does have a subtle yet effective sunburst to it. And by that, I mean the pattern, the actual cuts into the dial, or the patterning to that for the sunburst, you almost don't notice. It almost looks like a matte or satin, but whenever you look at it for light play, you can see that it really does play around with the light. And I like that. I think it's a nice touch. Additionally, this one has an exceptionally aggressive fume. If you're not familiar with fume, that's the gradient pattern where it goes from lighter to darker towards the outside of the dial. What I found with this one, it's not just that it transitions from light to dark, but actually the entirety of the dial itself tends to present fairly darkly. So what's nice about that is, depending on the way the light's hitting it, sometimes it almost looks like a black dial, sometimes it's a very deep forest green, sometimes it's a vibrant emerald green, so it really does have a lot of color shift to it, and I like that, and we'll check this out next to some other green watches so you can get a better idea as to what that looks like. Additionally, this one does have the date window at the 3 o'clock position, and you might have noticed this particular one has a black dial, but one of the options that you do, or a black date window rather, the other option you can do, though, is you can go with a white date window. So depending on your preference for that, or date wheel rather, you can actually fine-tune that to your individual liking. On the dial, it does have simple printed text. You can see at the 12 o'clock, it says Wise and Hitman. And then down at the 6 o'clock position, you have automatic and 200 meters. Around the perimeter, you can see that this does have individual minute markers, and then at the five increments, it does have numerals as well, which I think is a nice touch. And then additionally, from the 15 to the 20 and then over to the 40, you can see that it does change the direction of the text, a touch that I always like so you're not having to read the numbers upside down. Really well done there. Shifting over to the hardware, one of the first things you'll notice is this does have high polish to all of the hardware. So the perimeter, whether it be on the hands, the markers, etc., this does have an excellent polishing all the way around. And I think especially against this darker green dial, really adds a lot of pop. Additionally, these are going to be applied markers. And I found that the application of these, or the height of these applied markers, it has a lot of height to it, a lot of depth to it, and it really adds allure and pop to that. And I think it's very attractive to look at. I really have been pleased with those. And I think while it's subtle in the custom design there, they almost look like a baton for the individual markers, but you can see they have kind of a pentagon shape to those. So it changes up from the norm, something that I really enjoy. Additionally, looking at the handset, this does have a custom handset as well. These hands, I would call them kind of a sword, but kind of a sword with like a Dauphine style crease down the middle. And then they do have a generous application of Lume, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. As far as the length, I think the length of the hands is good. You can see the second hand kicks out, touches right to the outer perimeter. Additionally, the minute hand is right about the same length as well. And then the hour is plenty for legibility, nice fat, and it's just about the right length to tell for time. So now transitioning back to the Lume. This one does actually have Superluminova, specifically BGW9, and that is applied on all the markers, on all three of the hands, as well as the bezel. And let's go ahead and look at some of that Lume. As you can see, the Lume application here I think is very solid. I found with natural charging or with UV charging, this tends to endure. It's bright, it's well applied, and it's actually one that I like enough that I've been meaning to do a Lume battle for a while. I'm going to go ahead and do this one, feature this one in a Lume battle so we can check it out against some other Lume monsters that we do have and see how it stacks up and compares overall. Transitioning over to the bezel. This one, as you would expect from a dive-style watch, does have a unidirectional bezel, and this is 120 clicks. Let's go ahead and listen to that bezel action. This, I've got to say, this is one of the things that I've really been wild with. It has an extremely, extremely tactile feel to that. It's nice, it's easy to maneuver, it's not too tight, it's not too loose. Overall, the bezel alignment, I have found to be basically spot on for that. Bezel play, there's virtually no play whatsoever to it. I love listening to the bezel action on this. Been extremely pleased and impressed with that, especially on a $300 watch. That's kind of blown me away for that little touch alone. The actual bezel insert itself, on this particular one, this is a matte black bezel insert, and this is a ceramic insert as well. Though there are other bezel inserts, not only colors, but you can actually keep an eye on what the texture of those is. While this one does have a matte or a brushed finish to that, there are ones that do have polished finishes as well. So that's another area where they do have a lot of choices available. The coin edge for this, if you look at the bezel here, this is a first for me. This has a split coin edge. So you can see it is a traditional coin edge, nicely machined and milled all the way through, but then it has that center split that goes through, which I think adds visual appeal, doesn't have any impact on traction at all. So I think that was well done also. As I already mentioned here, the bezel action is personally, I think, one of the best bezels that I've ever felt for overall action, which is saying a lot because I've handled a lot of watches that are considerably more expensive than this one, but there's really nothing I can complain about. The sound, the feel, there's no tinniness. It has very direct clicks without having any grittiness whatsoever. Overall, I'm revisiting this one because I can't say enough good about that bezel action. Shifting over to the case. As you can see here, it actually reminds me of an NTH Barracuda or Nth Barracuda that I checked out, which was somewhat of an homage to the Tudor Black Bay. This one, you can see the overall case shape. It's somewhat of like a slab case shape. It does have the top edge and the bottom edge broken, and that is polished there. So it's kind of a slab, but with a broken edge, which I think keeps it from looking too boxy, no sharp edges whatsoever. And then additionally, it does have a nice flow to it. So it's a relatively flat case shape overall, but it does have kind of a full downturn, so it starts right from the mid case, and you can see that just swoops down to where it has sort of downturned lugs. And if you look at that in alignment with the Caseback, something I always appreciate, the lugs do pretty much dead on align with the Caseback, so you're not going to have this sitting high or proud on the wrist. And let's go ahead and take another look at that as to how it does sit on the wrist. I think it sits quite well on there overall, and you can see it does contour, taper, everything real nicely across there. All right, shifting back for the overall finishing, as we talked about here, so this does have linear brushing. Better actually click that clasp. You have linear brushing going along the side of the case, and then you have nicely done mirror polish. Of course, pardon any fingerprints there, but this is very cleanly done with the overall polish on that. The overall, as I talked about, the case shape, it does nest down in the wrist, which I think causes it to wear even thinner than the dimensions already show, and I already think it's plenty reasonable with the overall dimensions for that. Let's go ahead and shift over and talk about the crown. The crown on this one is going to be 6.9 millimeters, so a nice easy size to grip a hold of. It does, of course, as you'd expect on a diver, have a screw down crown. And one of the things I've been taken with, the action on this is absolutely butter smooth. So the threading, everything is very smooth. Actually adjusting for an NH, one of the smoother NHs that I felt. I don't know if that's just luck of the draw on this one or if they're working some kind of special magic with the gaskets or otherwise to not have that resistance or grittiness feel to that. Additionally, if we look at the crown here, you can see that that does have the Wise logo on that. So this is a nicely signed crown, no lume or anything to that, but it does have mixed textures and finishes for that. All right, transitioning over to the Caseback, we already took a little preview of this, but let's go ahead and look at it in greater detail. As you can see, this is very nicely machined in there. I found it's just the right depthness. You actually, when you're sliding your finger across, so not your nail, I can't feel any of that at all. And even somehow, I don't know if they chamfered the inside edge of this or what, where you actually have the key cutouts. There is no sharpness whatsoever anywhere on the back of this thing that I can feel. It just feels sublime across the back, which is really cool, especially for as much machining as they have. A lot of times they'll go a little too deep and you can feel a little bit of sharpness. Additionally, I think this is kind of cool. So they did an inner and outer text and it lines up there. So Thailand watch since 2008. And then over here you can see water resistance and then you have your 200 meters. I'll go ahead and spin this around so if there's anything you want to see, you can go ahead and pause on that. But I think it's really cool the way that they did that. And overall, and we'll talk about this more, this is the only place that I would have liked to have seen the Hitman on this watch, but we'll touch upon that further as we get into some of the critiques. This, as you would expect here, the Caseback, I neglected to mention, this is, of course, as you can see with the keys, this is a screw-down Caseback, as you'd expect for a diver. For the bracelet, this one does have a tapered bracelet. So at the top, as mentioned, this is going to be coming in at 20 meters, and this does taper down to 16 millimeters. So this does have a nice taper going for that one. Let's go ahead and look at that a little farther out. You can see it's a nice smooth taper, so even though it is 4 millimeters, despite the fact that this is sized to my relatively small wrist, it still has a nice, clean, smooth taper all the way down through. The end links. Check this out. Look at that fitment here for that end link. I mean, that is just extremely clean, pretty much a perfect taper all the way through. It does cut a little bit short there, but that's just for the articulation of the bracelet. And as you look at here, you can't actually see that in normal use, so it looks like it just seamlessly goes, almost like it's integrated into that case. So very nicely done there. This does have, as you might have noticed, female end links, so even though this looks like a style where oftentimes this would have a male end link protruding, they did actually go with a female piece or coupler in the middle there to give that nice taper, or nice drape rather, across the wrist. Additionally, this does have a traditional oyster or 3-link style for this bracelet. This is retained with screw pins, so as you can see there, and this does have nice screws. I found this to be easy to adjust, everything threaded smoothly, good overall design, plenty of depth to the heads, so nice touch there. The clasp on this is still going to be coming in with a milled clasp, and as you can see, this does have a relatively small, relatively basic signed clasp, traditional double pusher, so no fold over to retain that, so nice, easy to manipulate and adjust. All right, so now we have a better idea as to the overall characteristics of this watch. Let's go ahead and quickly look at this for some other watches here. So so you can see kind of what that color presents like. This is next to a Zelos Mako, and this is of course a bronze model. And this is a 40 millimeter versus the 41 here, so you can get an idea of sizing for that. Looking at another 40 millimeter green, this is going to be a Zelos, and this is another, of course, bronze. And this is their Swordfish 40, gives you an idea for size there. And then this is one that's going to be coming up on the channel here soon. This is a prototype from Second Hour Watches, and this is their Giant Stride model. Giant Stride. This one is coming in at 42 millimeters, so a little larger, and you get an idea as far as the dial presence there. Of course, this one's more of a compressor style with the inner rotating bezel on that. All right, so hopefully that gives you a better idea as to what to expect for this watch. Now let's talk about some of the pros, some of the cons. What are my final and closing thoughts for this one? First, as I've already alluded to throughout this video, I think the value on this is positively insane. You are getting so much for your money, not only in the overall specs. The specs themselves, yeah, they're nothing to write home about as far as NH35, Sapphire, those kind of things, ceramic bezel insert. They're great, and they're great at this price, but there are some others there. The big thing I think you really get with this one is just the finishing throughout. It really, at the price point, it's tough to beat. I mean, it is fantastically done in every regard, or nearly every regard, for this overall. The finishing, whether it be the brushing, the polish, the bezel action, the milling on the bezel itself, everything is just, it hits a lot higher than a $300 price point. Additionally, choices. This one, you're not stuck with anything. I neglected to mention earlier, with the second hand, you can actually go with a color choice. There's, I believe, 5 different colors. I went with no accent tip, but you can get different colors there. We already talked about the date window. You can go with a black or a white date window. You have 4 or 5 different dial choices that are available. You have different bezel choices that are available. You can even get this available in dual finish, where you can get gold or rose gold accents on the watch and case as well. So just so many choices that are available. And then the packaging. Hopefully you went and checked out or have already seen the unboxing video. The packaging for a $300 watch is pretty darn good also. But that's not to say that this is without any negatives or any critiques. First, the bracelet. The bracelet, while it has okay drape, overall, one of my biggest complaints is, as you can see, this has some really big links on this. So while it is a traditional oyster design, I think these links, I would have really liked to have seen them shrunken down. I wouldn't have minded an H-link style bracelet, but even if they went with oysters, I think they could have shrunk that down. I think it would have helped the articulation overall, and I think it would have just been a little bit more pleasing to wear, though this is still plenty comfortable on the wrist. Additionally, on the dial, that Hitman, in my opinion, it's got to go. I'm personally okay with the Wise. I've seen some other comments in some other reviews where people have talked about they prefer to have had the logo there. I'm honestly indifferent to that. I don't mind the Wise printed text on there, but that Hitman, I don't want to see that on the dial. Personally, I think that cheapens it a little bit. Not only do I think it's a little bit busy or a little bit much for text, but just seeing Hitman on the dial, I think that's going to turn some people off. Is it enough that it would keep me from buying the watch? Absolutely not. But that is something, I think it's perfectly fine. You've already got it big on the back of the watch. I think you can lose it on the dial. That was something that I would definitely recommend. Additionally, the clasp, as we looked at, this is just a fairly basic clasp. It works well for overall action. It only has 3 micro adjust. I wouldn't have minded to see some more micro adjust. As you can see, the bridge here does extend out, so even if they went with a little longer clasp, I don't think that would have hurt it for it. But I wouldn't have minded some extra micro adjust, but ideally, I would have really liked to have seen a toeless micro adjust on there. That would have been perfect, though at this price point, I think that's a pretty tall order. So where does that leave us overall? In summary, paid promotion or not, the reality is, in my opinion, you need to experience this watch for yourself. I think this one, at $300, I think you're going to be amazed as to what you get for the price. And this is one that I would say, if you at all like the style, if you're on the fence for this one, just go out and buy it. Alright, so I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy this, please do hit that like button. And most importantly, if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned. Like I said, we'll have new content coming all the time. Helps the channel tremendously. Additionally, if you are looking to help the channel further, there are Amazon affiliate links in the description. Those do get me a small commission, and that's appreciated. And finally, if you want to find me in another medium, you can find me on Instagram. Thanks for watching.